the most direct course to eventual understanding. Because therefore only open, unassuming perspectives present no resistance or diversion from learning. The prospective resolution which we might derive or merge from accounts which no more than pretend in any wise to account for the whole, therefore, lead us away from resolution in their every potential fault. The first obligation of wisdom, in fact, if there ever is such a thing, is to identify every account which is merely presumed, to revise or therefore to strip that account, to bear truth. Scope, then, is a further vital determinant in what we may or may not purportedly know. For in many things we can explore, we find that the things we may learn about something else may affect what we thought before about some other thing. Whether an object of consideration is part of a finite or at least seemingly infinite system, in any system where there is more than one possible object, therefore, it at least appears to be possible that all things of a given scope are relative. What does this mean, then, if further facts regarding further things force us to revise our perspective of other things, and if it is possible or even probable, therefore, that all things within a given scope are relative? It means that we cannot know anything of a self-prescribed scope unless we know all relevant things about all things of the scope. If all things are relative, then, therefore we can know nothing until we know all things in every way. Thus we do not know, and our perspective is at any time only true to our want or need to know, so long as we are always willing to embrace whatever further truth relates to what can be known, however that may invalidate any prior presumption. Yet only if, of course, we never raise presumption to a false status of fact, is there no offense of our own to defend against inevitable invalidation. Knowledge, as the only defensible thinking and the only thinking worth defending, then and then alone, when and if it exists only in a perfectly, perpetually evolving state, which in turn is never an obstruction to understanding, and in all engagement of which any worthy argument can only take the form of teaching. Thus we either pretend to know what we do not, or we are always, always, always conducive to teaching. The only plausible exception to the infinite is the finite system, where finite processes can act on finite objects to produce finite outcome. These systems, therefore, particularly where they are governed by finite rules imposed by man, are the only domains in which we can, in fact, prove actual knowledge. But never, 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 then, do we do so but by respecting the only means of potentially knowing the whole of the system, which knowledge, therefore, is never either presumed or arbitrary. Knowledge, instead, is always, always, always to walk the course of establishing the ultimate fact. Many people, nonetheless, being accustomed to the false tenets of a mere pseudoscience of purported economics, a pseudoscience which from its first moment to today has been itself wholly bereft of formal proof and theorem. Those who have yet to put the whole of this abomination of pretended economy into rightful perspective all too often simply presume themselves somehow that veritable, actual economics can neither be resolved, known, developed, or realized. But because even the lies of purported economics always involve finite elements, and particularly even very few classes of finite elements, and because either actual or purposely falsified economics too still involve two but few, a mere modest handful of simple finite processes, however formally disguised by lies or purposed deception, and because either true or falsified concepts of economy even therefore involve plain, simple, finite classes of outcome, we can absolutely and even readily know the consequences of systemic processes. Particularly, then, we can even measure or count absolutely whether those processes serve the common objects of any just people. So, in fact, we can and must know or understand the simple, irrefutable ramifications both of true economy and of falsified economy. For the former is our only possible salvation, and the latter destroys all justice, as we see this moment everywhere around us. To say or to presume we cannot develop a mathematically perfected economy is to presume we are incapable not only of resolving the most simple mathematic issues, it is to presume that merely somehow we cannot even rightly account for our own affairs. But not only then does mastery of any issue always result in consensus. For each and every one of us, the only truthful perspective of any and every issue too, always, always, always results in consensus. For never, never, never does a truthful or true account of perspective conflict with any further relevant thing we can truly learn. It is not necessary, then, to know the whole truth to avoid all disagreement. It is only necessary to observe and to abide by the actual limitations of what we might think only wrongly that we somehow know. Only when we pretend to have ascertained what we have not can we possibly disagree. Even the mere observation of these facts, therefore, gives us yet another tenet, that the only worthy dialogue or interaction reaches for the truth, first by accounting irrefutably for what it can. Then, if a finite domain of a matter has not already been realized to its whole extent, we are always compelled to carefully reach for the rest of the matter at hand. Mere recognition of all this means too, then, that we are always open to teaching, which in fact too can only come in the only veritable form of demonstrating the truth, however partial, evolving, or whole our actual knowledge of the truth may be. But we can never even disagree then, if we only conduct ourselves according to veritable observations of the truth. And so, we are always wrong, even in our mere behavior, when we assert one thing against another. For if we truly understand that one perception deserves to prevail over another, instead we show how. All progress depends upon veritable demonstration of the truth. Because any fault in what is held wrongly to be true disproves an incompetent perspective. Even prospective fault compels reasonable people to listen for veritable teaching. Because in the end, to truly know, each of us must walk the course of knowing. For never do we know anything if we merely assimilate what is inconclusively asserted. In the end, nonetheless, if all things are relative, then we can only truly know anything when and if indeed we have finally come to carefully and even conclusively know all things. We know nothing veritable about any possible dependence upon relativity then, until we fully know everything. On the other hand, as we have already reasoned, only in finite systems of finite elements, operations, and outcome can we know anything conclusively. The exception of this alternate tenet yet, of course, then, would generally apply to the common instruments, devices, or systemic developments of man. But still, the limitations or facts of purported knowledge govern how we can rightly develop, argue for, or argue against the necessary perfection of the common instruments of man. How then does all this relate to the prospect of mathematically perfected economy? The title, first of all, of our prospective discipline is altogether relevant, appropriate, and explicitly descriptive, because it raises and reflects the only veritable process by which we could know, indeed, that we could have accomplished what yet is an indispensable object to all just people.